Working from home is career suicide. And we only talk about the upside of working from home. And here we go. We know that people don't really want to hear this. Think about what's happening in the world. Declining birth rates, declining marriage rates, and loneliness epidemic. And we think that none of that is linked to the number of people that don't see people because they're doing Zoom calls from their living room. It's so crazy to not make that correlation.
I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is Leaders, the podcast that explores what drives the world's most influential people. This week, I'm speaking to Emma Grede. She's the chief executive and co-founder of Good American and founding partner of Skims, the shapewear and loungewear brand, which was valued at $5 billion in November 2025. Now, the last 10 years have seen her star rise, a lot of it down to her successful partnerships with a celebrity family named the Kardashians. But now may be a pivotal time for her, and I wanted to talk to her about one of the best and worst days of her career, how she leads with radical honesty, and why, as a self-styled behind-the-scenes woman, she's now chosen to step out into the limelight. Emma Grede, thank you so much for joining us. It's exciting to speak to you again.
It's so lovely to see you again.
Talk to me about the Good American. The day you launched was seen as one of the biggest successes, almost of all times in the denim world. 1 million, right, in sales. But then you write in your book that actually it was quite stressful and didn't go to plan.
You know what? That's an understatement, because it's really interesting when something from the outside looks so perfect. And in one way, it was a total dream. You know, it was the first time that I'd done a business in apparel. And for all intents and purposes, it was like this beautiful, amazing thing that went so well, except from the inside where, I had no inventory. We'd had this beautiful dream first $1 million day that kind of went down in history. But behind the scenes, I was scrambling. I had a wait list kind of coming out of my ear holes and no way to satisfy the demand. But more than that, I had this kind of doubt permeating through the company, on the board with my shareholders, that perhaps because of that oversight that I wasn't the right person to run the company. And actually looking back, it's kind of interesting that I never felt any fear around that moment. I just kind of looked at everyone and was like, leave me alone, I'm going to figure it out. But
never any fear. There was not a moment where you thought, actually, I need to take a step back, or I need to convince the board, or...
No, and it's so interesting because so many people talk to me about, imposter syndrome and being a first-time founder. I never had any of that. I always think, if not me, then who? I in my head, it was my idea and I brought it to fruition and I was going to figure out any of the problems. And so much of being an entrepreneur is about figuring it out. You never have the answers. And I think if you have the answers, you're probably not moving fast enough.
But the board told you off.
I got a bit of a telling off. Yeah, well, I wouldn't say a telling off. There were just some dismissive tones, it was like I was a genius at 9 a.m. and by noon, it was like, perhaps you're not, best suited for this role. And I just completely dismissed that.
So how did you regroup?
In a really tumultuous way. I think, I did what I know to do, which is when you don't know something, you ask somebody who does. And so I started calling around. I tried to information gather. I was calling competitors, I was calling retailers, I was literally visiting factories. And so in a way you could literally get on the ground and say how can I change this? How can you move this? But the simple fact was the fabric wasn't available because I hadn't had the foresight to get out in front of the calendar and know what I was, up against. But a new brand is a new brand. There was no data, there was no history, there was nothing telling me that this was going to be that successful. And so would I have done anything different? No, I don't think so.
What did you learn about yourself? Because a lot of chief executives will say, look, it's only by learning and failing that finally you have the posture to say look, I got this.
Yeah.
But you think I got this right from the start.
I really did. And perhaps that was naivety, but I knew I'd figure it out. In my head, I just thought, this is just another problem. And my life is a series of problems as a leader and as somebody who starts companies and builds things from scratch.
Did you tell the employees, or did you celebrate with them and figure it out by yourself?
I had no choice. The great thing about Good American at the start is that I'd chosen that initial team really well. So I had veterans in my business. The person, and thank God she still works with me now, now, but in a different company. But the woman that was really in charge of product had been in the denim space for 20 years. And the guy that ran all design really was, like so ingratiated in the denim community in LA that we were able to literally knock on doors and ask favors. And so I thankfully had surrounded myself with people who knew better and could help me open doors.
You talk a lot about, giving employees honest feedback. Is that radical honesty? How do you describe it?
It is radical honesty, but that's also so much about who I am. And so I've always thought to myself, I can just be honest with myself. I don't need to walk around with some, guilt on my shoulder and carrying stuff that doesn't serve me. So for me, it's just about honesty, take the learning, move on.
What does that look like when you talk to employees?
It looks very straightforward. Here's the thing. I don't think anybody in my organisations ever wonder what I'm thinking. Nobody's like, I'm trying to figure out how Emma's feeling. It's like, I am really firm and really fair. I have very, very, very high expectations for myself and for everybody around me. I give very, very clear feedback. And my job as founder and as a CEO is to have the vision, right? But it's to communicate that vision downwards. And so I'm in a constant conversation with everyone around me. I think I'm super repetitive. I say the same three things over and over and over again. And everybody in the organization should be able to know what our priorities are and know what we're doing. And so I think I'm a little bit of a broken record, but I think that there's an element of consistency that comes with that. And I'm bloody consistent.
And you've talked before about needing different people around you to go from 10 million to 100 million to 5 billion.
Oh, don't you just? It's not the same people. And, I kind of raised myself in business having an enterprise mentality. I learned that very, very on. I'm not here to do people favors. Business is business, and I do what's best for the company every single day. And often that is what's best for the individual. Nobody wants to be kept in a role that they're not best suited to, because that never works out for the individual or for the organization. So I've learned over time that, what is good for the company is ultimately good for everybody.
But what is that, ruthlessness?
I don't know that it's ruthlessness. I think that it is just being able to delineate what is right at the time. And, here's the thing. I think specifically as a female leader, you're judged on, how empathetic are you? And so I think the way that we work, and the reason that I think directness is always best, we all know where we stand all the time. I'm not waiting for an assessment moment or a 6-month mark or some kind of formal review. If you're failing, you probably know you're failing because we've probably spoken about it. It's not like a bolt out of the blue.
So how do you hire? Do you hire people that you think can take the heat in the kitchen, or do you expect everyone to just, take it?
Well, I hire differently for different stages of the business. But I think in the beginning, you want generalists. You want people that are going to have I'll do that, hand up mentality, whatever it is. I think as businesses mature, you're looking for more, category and subject and departmental expertise, and typically hiring for an enormous amount of experience. But for me, what I place so much value on is flexibility. You have to be willing to look and take your experience and do things a little bit differently. So I'm always trying to hire for people that are seriously experienced, but seriously flexible.
Is there a concern with loyalty? I mean, are employees still loyal if they feel that you can cut them off at any point?
I mean, I don't know about cutting them off at any point. And I think that loyalty is something that you earn. There's a trust in a business. And it really is about people learning to trust that what you say is what you mean and is what happens. And when you do that, you can be trusted regardless.
Do you think a lot about incentives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is just the expectation. Incentives have to be built in for the best people. And that happens at all levels of the organization. But everybody has to understand how the incentives come to be, right? The company has to perform well in order for the incentives to be, created, but then for them to be paid out and to make sense.
You can't mention Emma Grede without the Kardashians. In a way, they were her biggest supporters. She reportedly met matriarch Kris Jenner first and pitched teaming up with Khloe Kardashian for Good American. But was there actually a moment, a meeting of minds, and how did she convince some of the most famous people in the world to go into business with her? Can you talk to me about the pitch when you pitched Good American to the Kardashians?
There was never such a pitch idea. Specifically with Good American, there was an idea that I had, and I really felt that the partnership would, make this thing just accelerate. But it never is, how people kind of see it in the movies. There was a relationship that existed and a moment in time, and the best things and the best businesses always work when what's happening in the culture chimes with whatever you're doing. And I think at that moment, when you go back 9 years ago, the idea of body positivity and what it meant to do real inclusivity in fashion just wasn't what it was today. And so I think that whenever you're starting something, it's like this melting pot and a smorgasbord of small decisions and the right thing in the culture and the right moment in time and you being the right person, and some element of magic has to happen. But there's never like this bingo moment where everyone goes, yeah, let's go.
Don't you have to, you had to sell your idea, right? At some point.
Yeah, but
they had to say, yes,
you never
we're in.
need to sell an idea that is that good. It's like there's an idea and then there are people that decide to jump on board. But, again, I think it feels more like a fantasy to be like there's this moment of sell and this moment of yes, because the best partnerships, they happen over time and they come together because everybody has something to bring to the table. And I think that was one of those magical moments.
A lot of people have ideas, but then they don't really come to fruition.
Well,
it's difficult to get it made.
They have, things that they want to do in their head, and an idea can live on a piece of paper or on your desktop for the longest time, but you've got to get out. The hardest thing is to just get out of the gate.
But what's holding people back? And I do see that a lot, actually. People are either too afraid or say they don't know where to start or they don't have the capital.
I don't come from a background where I had either the capital or the network or the educational background or any of those things. I just tried a lot of stuff, and eventually one of those things happened to work out. And at some point, you've just got to take whatever it is that you have and try. And again, I think that we're in such a time where there's this idea that everything has to be like $1 billion brand, everything has to be a unicorn.
But you've managed to do everything at scale. Right, so it's smart.
Everything that you know about.
Okay, what are the failures?
There's a ton of failures. There's a ton of things that I've done that didn't work. And when I think about my early businesses, I'd opened offices that didn't quite work out. I have, grown companies and then had to downsize them. And those things are really painful. Right now, we only show the glossy side, the amazing things, the great headlines, the stuff we want to put on our Instagram. And the reality is anyone who is an entrepreneur that's done multiple things will have failed. And you have to get comfortable with this idea of not everything working out. It's not always that you did something wrong, so that this thing in this time, this situation didn't work for a myriad of reasons. So long as you figure out what are those reasons and what did I learn from it and what will I do different next time, then that has to be left behind. And I think that if you look around in the culture, that is way harder for women than it is for men, because women are held to an entirely different standard when they start things and they fail. And yet we have men that fail over and over again and close it down and go out and race the next day, and nobody mentions anything about it.
So once you have a failure, do you do a postmortem to see what went wrong? Do you? With the whole team?
I tell you.
So it's like spreadsheets.
Absolutely. And you really have to understand, well, what did you do, right? Because I think it's easy to point to the market and conditions. It's easy to look at all of the things that were outside of your control. But often there's a pattern in these things, that you are a huge part of. And so I really try to, and I hate to go with woo-woo, but you kind of have to go inside. You have to understand, what is it that I miss and what is it that I didn't see? And how can I change that for the next thing?
For a long time, Emma Grede has been the brains behind growing other people's brands. But over the last few years, she's been making a visible effort to be front and center. Whether it's launching a podcast, high-profile TV appearances, or now her debut book, Start With Yourself, this new chapter appears firmly focused on building her own brand. But I wanted to know why now and what next. So in the past, you used to say you were a behind-the-scenes woman.
Yeah.
What's changed?
I still feel like a behind-the-scenes woman. I still go into the office every single day. I'm like behind the scenes in front of the camera. I do a lot of things and wear a few hats. I think what I've realized as I've become more successful is that wherever I go, people ask me the same questions. They always say, you know, how did you do this? And I don't think people are that interested in me. I think they want to understand how they can be successful for themselves. I'm really trying to like lift the lid and demystify what it means to have a successful career and to start a business and to scale a business and what it means to sell or IPO a business, and specifically through the lens of a woman, because I believe that there is social conditioning that actually makes women avoid the exact behaviors that lead to wealth creation, that lead to success, that lead to leadership and opportunity for us.
What do you think actually doesn't serve female leaders? Because it starts from a very young age.
How long have you
we
got?
We have a lot of time.
I need to get these girls like when they're 10, 11, 12, you know, because a lot of it is what we carry. I don't know that the idea of imposter syndrome even exists when we talk about male founders, male entrepreneurs. Why would we be talking about it so frequently for women?
I've heard male entrepreneurs.
You have?
Yeah.
Did any of them say, yes, I had it?
Yes.
Really? Mm-hmm. I've never heard one.
And then they say, look, I looked around the room and I thought, actually, if they can do it, I can do it.
I can do it. But the same sentence said by a woman carries a different weight. And I have seen, certainly in my own career, this notion of imposter syndrome can be planted as a seed, even when it doesn't exist. And that's what I want to stop. I want to stop us stopping ourselves getting out of the gates before we've even given ourselves a chance. Because my experience is that women are excellent at making money in the business, and they are excellent at just thinking about things in a really unique way. And I hire so many women that are brilliant, especially when they come back into the workplace after having children, because their time and the way they think about things and is so much more precious that they get really, really good at how to
done.
Oh, they get
so quickly,
so much done, and they get it done so quickly with a different sense of urgency.
Do you see yourself as a retail mogul?
No.
That's a conglomerate. You're all over the internet saying, you're trying to build the next LVMH. Does that feel good?
So fun. I mean, that's such an interesting headline. How flattering. I think that's like Instagram headlines. Oh, it's a good one.
It is a good one. But
it's a goodie.
What are you trying to build?
What's really interesting is that what I set out to do, I've kind of done. I wanted to create businesses that I could be really proud of, and I wanted to be part of businesses that I really enjoyed going in and working in every day. Like, I wake up on a Monday and I'm like, let's go. And that for me is winning, because where I grew up and where I come from, people dreaded work. They went to work to pay their bills, and that is not what I do. I do it, and I do it for a lot less. I mean, I'm glad it comes with what it does, but I'll be honest.
You see big, you dream big.
Yeah, I've always seen big and dreamed big, but I think that there comes, there's a level of responsibility that comes with that, because I think that, when I look at the landscape, specifically for women of colour, I think that talent's fairly evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't. And so when I look at the ability that I have to create opportunity for other people, that feels like a responsibility for me. Not in a like super worthy way, but in a way where it's like, wow, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and I've done really well putting my money into other female founders. Yeah. So I actually think there's this whole part of what I'm doing that is part lifting the lid, part giving opportunity, part bringing, like a bunch of people into a conversation and into the business climate that might not otherwise be doing it, and really they should.
Are you good at, you seem very good at identifying brands.
I'm really good at spotting things.
Is this, that's a difficult talent, right?
It's a difficult
like
talent.
Magic almost.
And listen, I think there's a part of me that says, well, of course, that sounds easy now because my deal flow is so good. But I was good at it even when it wasn't. I'm good at spotting opportunities. I think like a customer. I am my own customer in so much of what I do. I have a terrific sense of value and what something is worth. If you buy a pair of jeans from me for $149, they're going to be worth like every $149 that you pay for them.
Is the customer of today radically different from the customer of 10 years ago?
Customers are so much more informed, and there are no barriers to what you can get, where you can get it. And brands have more responsibility to their customers than ever before. And that's fine, that's healthy, may the best brands win.
Is it more difficult? It's just harder to sell.
Harder
right? to sell because of tariffs and moving stuff around.
Well, it's harder, and the media landscape is so much more fragmented.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you go back to when I started Good American, you could find all of these crazy unlocks, and that shifted into Instagram and shifted into TikTok. And now it's totally fragmented, and we're all like struggling and going, okay, where's our customer coming from?
Social media.
Yes, somewhat social media, but what channels in social media, and where are you spending, and how does that shift and change on a daily basis dependent on the platform and the vertical even within those channels. So I think there's a lot to consider. The thing that I've learned is that good product will always win. And so what I don't let that side of things keep me up at night. What keeps me up at night is coming up with a new innovation, constantly delighting and pleasing our customers and coming up with things that they don't even know that they need.
Is there a brand that you admire more than others?
Oh my goodness, there's so many brands that I admire. We just spoke about LVMH, but like Louis Vuitton, I always look at that brand because it's so hard to stay that hot all the time. And, even when I think about a brand like Chanel, it's a brand that I have always wanted since I was 10 years old, and I want it even more now. I'm constantly texting to figure out when I can get this latest collection. Like, when does it hit the store? How do I not miss it? And I really admire brands that have that type of staying power coupled with that type of heat. That's a really, really hard thing to do. And of course, I would say brands in fashion, but I don't know enough about like other spaces. I'm of course enthralled by what's happening in AI at the moment, and I feel like I'm like everybody else. I'm just trying to keep up and trying to make sure I understand and trying to make sure that I'm using everything at my disposal.
Do you think it'll change your business?
It is changing our business
is
already.
It?
Yeah,
like
undoubtedly.
In terms of hiring or
I think mostly in terms of like how we're planning the business. So when you think about inventory, needs, customer data, the way that AI is able to get into those systems and read quicker than we've ever been able to. I think what's really interesting is how to think about businesses in the age of AI. The way that I look at it is that you have to safeguard everything that requires a human touch, creativity, innovation, design, like all of those things should be done by people that understand other people's needs, and the rest ought to be AI.
Okay, I have rapid fire. You ready?
Born ready.
Working from home, good or bad?
Working from home is career suicide. And we only talk about the upside of working from home. And here we go. We know that people don't really want to hear this. Think about what's happening in the world. Declining birth rates, declining marriage rates, and loneliness epidemic. And we think that none of that is linked to the number of people that don't see people, because they're doing Zoom calls from their living room. It's so crazy to not make that correlation. The key to a long and happy life is your close relationships.
Should the unpaid internship be brought back?
Listen, I did a lot of unpaid internships, and I did it while being somebody that didn't have a lot of money. And that was a real struggle for me. It was a huge unlock for me, the ability to go into an organization and get under the hood without having any qualifications or right to really be there. I think that there have to be certain protections on it, but I'd like to lift the lid, because there's so much to be learned.
MBA, worth it or waste of money?
Depends how much money you've got. It wasn't my path. Listen, I am a mother of 4, and so the idea that any of my kids would go and do an MBA would be an absolute dream. But would I force it on them? That's an individual decision. And if you can, then do. But if you can't, don't sweat it.
Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What a joy.
That was so fun.
Thank you.
And it kind of flew by. It's 7:15.
I know. I'm like, what happened?
I'm like,
I was like,
so good.
Pew!